Don't get mad. Get media. MadPod. Rare celebrity interviews. Indie music. MadPod.com. Your global audio internet connection. Coming up on MadPod.com.
Originally from Hammersmith, London, England, and joining us live from the UK, the father of synthesized techno-rock, the prolific Gary Numan. Welcome, Gary. A pleasure speaking with you, my friend.
Thanks, Shadow.
And best known for taking the U.S. by storm after the release of your Billboard #9 pop smash Cars from the Atco LP The Pleasure Principle, released February 16, 1980, which still stands as the defining new wave single of all time. That late winter hit was in heavy airplay rotation on both AM and FM here in the States. Was that also an international hit, Gary?
Yeah, pretty much, as far as I know. Well, I actually didn't really follow it very much. You know, I was very much based in England, so I was very aware of what was going on there. I remember I was flying home from the States once, and I stopped off in the Philippines just to have a look, and I got presented with a gold record for Cars while I was there, and I didn't even know it was released in the Philippines. So there was quite a lot of places where it was successful that I didn't even know it was released in, but from what I can gather, it seemed to pretty much do most of the world, yeah.
Now, Gary, in 1976, you joined a UK punk band called Lasers. Then the following year, you, bassist Paul Gardner, and drummer Paul Simmons split to form a new group dubbed Tubeway Army, recording some truly futuristic singles such as Valerium and Scarlet in a styling similar to punk meets Kraftwerk. What became of the demos you submitted to Beggar's Banquet? Were they ever issued as singles or album cuts, Gary?
I think they released an album a few years after I started with them called The Plan. And as far as I know, most of the early punk demos that we did were put out on The Plan. But that was kind of as I was leaving Beggars. I wasn't massively involved in all that. I know that Beggar's Banquet signed me as a punk band. They had no interest in electronic music whatsoever. And I went to a studio to record what should have been my first punk album for Beggar's Banquet. And a mini-moog had been left behind in the studio from the band that was in there before. And I converted all of my songs from guitar in a simplistic kind of way onto the synthesizer while I was in the studio making that album. So when I went back to Beggars with this supposed punk album, what they got was a pseudo-electronic album. But luckily for me, it was such a small label, they had no money, and they couldn't afford to send me back into the studio to make the albums that they wanted. And so I became an electronic act, almost by accident, really.
Now, Jagged, your latest studio album, is released in the UK and Europe, as well as the United States and Canada on Mortal Records, and licensed to Cooking Vinyl, co-produced with underground electronic artist Ada Fenton. Tell us about your first project since 2000's Pure. It
was a long time since Pure. It took 5.5 years for me to get Jagged out after making Pure, which here was something of a disaster, really, because Pure had done very, very well. And there was a huge momentum and a lot of critical acclaim and respect that I was getting from Pure. And if I'd have been a very sensible man, I would have done the next album much more quickly. But that's not really the way I make music or the reasons I make music for. I do it because I love it, and I do it when I want to. And the problems I was having, I first of all had some big record company issues, but we started to have a family. And so I had a baby daughter come along, and it had been a very difficult thing to get that. And so we went the IVF route and so on. So when she came along, I didn't want to miss any of it. And then another baby come along, and my mind just wasn't on it. I was just thinking about family and the children and getting that side of my life sorted out. And so, although it seems like a long time between Pure and Jagged, it is a long time between Pure and Jagged, the bulk of the work was actually done in the last 12 months. So if I'd have just got on with it as soon as I started Pure, then I could have had Jagged out in 2001, 2002 at the latest. So I was a bit silly, really. It was really much, much too long, and I got so heavily distracted, and I really shouldn't let that happen again. I'm not having any more kids, so the two is enough. So I don't think that's going to happen again.
Well, you know, Gary, sometimes family matters do take precedence.
Yeah, I think so. For me, it did, and I've no regrets about it whatsoever. But from a career standpoint, it was almost like shooting myself in the back of the head. You know, really wasn't the best thing to have done, but I really wouldn't change it for a minute.
Yes, after 5 years, it is like starting all over again, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so, yeah.
Now, here's the track listing: Pressure, Fold, Halo, Slave, In a Dark Place, Haunted, Blind, Before You Want It, Melt, Scanner, and of course the title cut, Jagged. Future Music writes, and I'm quoting here, "When the chorus of tracks like Slave, In a Dark Place, and the superb Haunted hit home, you see the lights lift and the arms raise, just like they did back in 1979. Boy, what fine accolades, Gary.
It's the album has had some excellent reviews. I must confess that I was not entirely sure that was going to happen. I mean, it is a very dark album, and it's really quite heavy. And it just felt as if it might be out of its time. You know, there is some kind of an electronic movement going on again here now, at least, but it's all very lightweight synth pop stuff. The sort of things that some of us were doing in '78, sort of way back then. And I don't have a problem with that, but it felt as if Jagged was much too heavy to be accepted. But luckily, that's not been the case, and the reviews have been largely, well, without a doubt, it's been the best reviewed album that I've ever had, ever. And to come at this stage of my career, I mean, I'm not sure how many I've made now, but it's getting on for 20 original albums. To have that kind of acclaim at this stage of my career, I couldn't have asked for more, couldn't have wished for more, really. So the fact that it took a long time, I was also worried about, but all of these things seem to have just not really been a big problem that I was expecting them to be.
Yes, I agree. And you're using real drums on certain cuts these days. Is this a back-to-basics move, Gary?
Not really. It kind of looks like that. Well, I guess it kind of is like that, but not through any great intention of mine. I can't take any credit for that. I was hanging out with Jerome Dillon, who was with Nine Inch Nails at the time when Nine Inch Nails played here last. And through the course of the conversation, Jerome said that he'd like to play on the record. So I was really flattered by that and honoured. And so Jerome played on two of the tracks, one called Halo and the other one was called Haunted. And when they came back, and I actually sent him what I thought were finished tracks, when they came back, the difference was noticeable. It was much more powerful, much more aggressive. It just made such a big difference, and I just didn't expect that. Because of that, I decided that I needed to have as much live drumming on the record as I could possibly get. So I got my own drummer that plays in my own band to come and play on some things. But this all happened as the album was starting to be mixed. Now, it was essentially finished by the mixing, so there was no real time. So I think my own drummer, I think we got 5 songs done, but in a day. We had one day to get everything done as much as we could, and that was the best we could do. So not all of the songs on the record have got real drums on them, but a great deal of it, and certainly far more than I've done in previous albums where I had nothing really, no real drums at all. And I do think it works, and it is something I'd like to do even more so with the next album and whatever comes after that.
From your standpoint, it must be thrilling knowing Basement Jaxx sampled your songs on Where's Your Head At, and additionally the impact of the Sugar Babes' #1 single, Freak Like Me, was based around your 1979 chart topper, Our Friends Electric. That's a pretty sound tribute to me, Gary.
Well, yeah, that was really cool, but what I'm really proud of and far more happy with is that Marilyn Manson has done a cover of one of mine, Foo Fighters, Fear Factory, Nine Inch Nails particularly did a cover of Metal. African band Barter did a cover of the same song that Nin did, the song called Metal. The fact that this has come from such a wide variety of musical styles, from Sugar Babes and pop, Basement Jaxx and dance, right across to Fear Factory and Nin and Manson on the other end of the heavier end of the scale. I'm incredibly proud of that, and it's quite a rare thing, I think, to have had an influence or an effect on such a wide genre of music. And it's made a big difference to me. It's given me a lot more confidence. I think it's turned a lot of people towards me that perhaps wouldn't have given me a listen before. It's generated new interest. And certainly the critical acclaim that I get now is largely due, I think, to people reevaluating me because of these other people and the fact that they've done covers and said complimentary things about me.